All right.
So I'll do a roll once
Okay, John Boyko is here.
okay, is Steve Gorelnick on the line?
I'm here.
Joe Nappick on the line? Joe Nappick on the line? Michelle on the line?
Yes, present.
Okay, is Belvin on the line? John Belvin?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, apparently Joe Nappick is not on, or he's not hearing me. If someone wants to give him a call, see if he wants to participate, we'll get the meeting started. So I'll call the special meeting of the Board of Enforcement and Taxation to order. Would you please rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we did roll call, and now we'll go to item number 4, new business, discussion of mayor's proposed budget for FY 2021. If you recall, at the last meeting last week, I had asked you to submit questions. We have one set of questions, and I'll attempt to answer the questions, and we'll start from the top. The first question was the employees' resources, Social Security. Was questioning the dollar amount, and the department request was for $750, but the allocation was for $830. I believe that we spent last year $791,420, and we're on track to do that again this year. Next year, I think we'll probably have more people employed, and so there's an anticipation that with the job postings that are out there now, that there'll be more. I think it's an additional 20,000, 20 or 30,000 over what this year is. But again, it's kind of a moving target because it's really is predicated on the salaries and the number of people that we employ.
So, Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a follow-up question on that? This is Michelle. So if I'm understanding your response correctly, then this number would potentially change depending on whether or not additional hires are made and whether or not additional positions are approved citywide. Is that correct?
Pretty much. In fact, it could even go down. Because I do anticipate some layoffs coming, and I don't know how long that those layoffs will be in effect.
Well, I guess that's sort of the reason for my question there, because it sort of seems like we're heading into a period of time where, whether or not we can maintain the current level of employment across the city is in doubt. And so I just don't know whether it makes sense to increase that line item when we anticipate that potentially citywide the number of employees is actually going to decrease.
Well, I can't anticipate anything at this point because I don't have a crystal ball, and that could be said for a lot of this discussion. The uncertainty of how the revenues fare out, up or down, is going to be a determining factor. Of course, there's a few other things that are in the mix too that may help or may not help in terms of grants that may be received or other revenues that we're anticipating coming in from the state that might be able to help out. know, to be honest with you. And I don't think the state knows, despite the fact that they just keep spending. I don't think they know.
Right.
So,
I think we all understand that we're in a difficult position here and that there's a lot that's not predictable. And I'm happy to move on and maybe we can just put a pin in that and come back to it if we can get more information.
yeah, I don't know that there's more information that will be had between now and the time that this budget gets finalized. And, you know, here again, it's anybody's guess what's going to happen. All right, so we'll move down to the town clerk's office and question the regular payroll figure of $241. Appears to be missing the salary of the senior record clerk. The line for that salary in the back material is blank. And if you add up the retained remaining salaries, the figure listed is 241, 341. However, the position schedule indicates that this is an existing position that is filled. I think there are two vacancies actually in the town clerk's office. One job posting is still at least one, probably two. That's filled. City office generates an awful lot of economic activity for us. And job posting is at least one.
I'm having a lot of difficulty hearing you. Is it possible for other folks on the call to go on mute so that we don't have interference? Because I can't hear.
Everyone on the other line will put their phone on mute. That would cut back on all the unnecessary chatter in the background. Thanks. Yeah, I'm just referencing that there is, you know, throughout this budget, there are unfilled positions that are, you know, I don't think at any one given time that we have 100% complement, just because of the nature of how long it takes to hire people, to find the right people. You know, people, they quit, they get terminated, they die, they retire. There's a whole variety of things that affects the employment schedule, but nonetheless, these are union positions. And, you know, when you start reducing these positions, then you wind up with grievances. And, you know, for the most part, I mean, the positions that exist on the city side have been constant for the last 15 years. And that really hasn't fluctuated much one way or another, but there's still a budget for these positions in the event and anticipation that they'll be filled. And most of them are. So, I mean, that's the long and the short of the basis or the root of what your question is asking in the majority of these different departments. You know, going down to I think that I discussed with Paul Hill of the fire department, and I think that 325 number did not get correctly registered in the budget run, and probably needs to revert back to the number that I had, because the intent was not to increase anything but to maintain the status quo. So that's one area that can get altered.
Okay, so we're going back to 270 there?
70, yeah.
Okay. And is there, just going back to the city town clerk position for a second, is there an expected salary for that vacancy that we should be budgeting in? Because I guess my point was, if that is an actual position that needs to be budgeted in, currently it technically isn't budgeted in because the line is blank, and so there's no budget for that position should it get filled.
Well, again, depending on when it gets filled, it could happen 6 months into the fiscal year, it could happen 10 months into the fiscal year, it could happen 2 months into the fiscal year. Will really determine how much you need to put in there. And if that were the case, then that would create an excess in the part-time payroll that can actually be transferred during the course of the year.
Right, but right now we're not building in any budget for that vacancy. If that's intentional, I guess that's fine. That's one way to do it. But then we can't fill that position over the course of the upcoming year. if the intention was to budget for that senior records clerk position, then we need to budget for it. We need to have a figure in there that is the anticipated salary for that position, right?
Not necessarily, because that hire will not occur by July 1st, so you won't need a full year's salary, as an example.
Even if it's a partial year salary, you still have to have a budget for it, I think.
Well, it could be, as I said earlier, it could come out of the part-time payroll account, payroll line item. You know, those two complement and offset each other, have for years.
Okay, so the plan is not to budget for that position.
Right.
Okay.
And then with respect to the police department, I'm not quite sure, what your question is, other than I can tell you that, we have, the hiring process for police officers is, painful, lengthy, and sometimes it's, very fruitful. As an example, you can have a certified list of 10 people on it, and then the background checks come in, and you can probably only hire 2 people. And so, the challenges with hiring cops today is the same for every municipality. We just got done doing 5 new hires, but 4 of them came from the state police. So that made it a lot easier.
Other communities don't seem to have this difficulty in hiring police. Shelton seems to have this perennial difficulty in hiring police. It's atypical for Shelton, just an observation.
Okay.
Yep. What towns would you be talking about that don't seem to have a difficulty? Because I know several folks that are cops in other towns, and they do certainly have the same
Bridgeport
issues.
Bridgeport for one doesn't seem to have a problem. There are some other towns that I don't know specifically what they are. They don't seem to have a problem, but this seems to be a unique problem for Shelton in hiring police. And heaven knows we do need more police for quality of life issues that exist in Shelton.
All right. Well, the process is still the same no matter what town you're in. All right, and
that's right.
It's a daunting process. I would have to say that we are not unique to this situation.
Well, you're in a small group, I would say. Well, so police cost money.
We've had this conversation the last several budget cycles, and I guess there's several main themes here. One is that although it sounds like a lot of new hiring has recently been done, which is different from what we've heard in previous budget cycles. In the past, we've heard we budgeted for 10 new officers and we had trouble hiring 1. So now it sounds like we have, I think you said 5, if I heard correctly, new officers. And so I guess the question is, given that you've just onboarded 5 new officers, if I heard that correctly, is this the right time for us to say, in addition to those 5 new officers, we are going to plan to onboard 6 new officers in the upcoming year, when we're having all of these budget uncertainties? And some of the projections are, for example, to have 2 new captains, a new deputy chief, 4 new lieutenants, 2 sergeants, and a detective. If I understood the backup materials correctly, and you can correct me if I'm off base here. So that's one question, and it's a question. I can be persuaded on it one way or another, but I need more information to understand what the thinking is here.
Well, if you look at the history of the police department, the number of budgeted positions has probably been constant for the last 15, 20 years. I don't think we're adding any new positions in terms of budgets. Now, pay raises go up and that affect the payroll line item, but really that's the extent of it. And sometimes positions are filled, sometimes they're not filled, sometimes, again, we have retirees that we don't anticipate. So, that, and look, at the end of the day, if the money is not spent, it goes back to the general fund. So, I'm always going to put myself in a position where I have the ability to react. So don't think that I'm going to play it so close to the line that I put myself at a disadvantage if something should go awry and needs our attention and we don't have resources, just because an expense didn't occur from the year before. So there's a real consistency about the number of these positions on the city side of the budget that have remained constant. As an example, conversely, the Board of Ed, their employee count continues to go up and their student enrollment drops. It's mind-boggling to understand how that can occur, especially when you lose 1,100 of students in enrollment over the last 10 years. That's not insignificant, 1,100. Probably the equivalent of 2 schools.
Right. So maybe if the Board of Education employees that we requested be present for this budget hearing are present, they can speak to those issues. But I think that the point is that the police department budget in particular has been oversubscribed as compared to spending consistently. And at times, the rationale for that has been, as you just articulated, we need the ability to hire more officers. And at times, the rationale has been, we need more money in the budget so that we can build up the surplus. And those two purposes are different. They're at odds with one another. And so if the purpose is to have more revenue in the budget so that we have a surplus, then I think that goes to the request to set up a rainy day fund and budget for it and put the money into the rainy day fund, not budget for a police department that is a phantom police department where the officers that we keep saying that we're going to hire do not exist and are not hired.
Well, I don't think we're using that to build a surplus. We do quite well in being able to effect a pretty good surplus from time to time over the last 30 years, as evidenced by the audit reports. Unfortunately, this past year, with the overspending of the Board of Education for the last 2 years, that's put us at a disadvantage. So, again, and I make the point that if you look at the number of positions that are in the police department, that number has not fluctuated hardly at all in probably 20 to 25 years. So, but here again, their costs continue to escalate. I think something that no one even talks about is the police pension issue, which the state, when they don't generate enough activity through its investments, they just assess municipalities across the state. If you're in the state plan like we are, our assessment is going to go up like 4% from last year. Liz, do you know what the exact number is? Is it 3 or 4%? But the increase, that represents over $100,000 of new money. So, those are costs that just can't be avoided. And I don't know how you equate that to building a surplus, but okay. I'm not gonna debate any of this stuff with anybody. That's for sure. So, moving on.
This is Steve Gorelnik. I have a question. The police officers that we hired, the 5 of them, were they brought in at higher ranks?
No.
They were not. So, because I know, because they did, when we spoke to the police department last year, they talked about the fact of how they want to promote from within to move people up, and they do specifically stay within a bunch of towns so they could share that cost of that pension. And it's a good factor because it gives them more to draw from. Is that your experience?
No.
Okay, then I guess we were misled the last time.
Yeah, I don't know what is it that you're talking about. You're talking about the pension cost?
Yes, you mentioned pension costs, and we were told that as they hire, they look at people that are going to be transferred within the pension so they could keep their pension, and that helps in transferring people from other cities. That's the way they described it to us.
That's true, but that's a separate issue.
Okay. Well, you brought up pension amounts. So they're going to come in at a higher pension because they're bringing their pension from another city.
Some of these
Or
are
town.
hires. Some of these are new hires that aren't coming from a new city. Some of them are state police that are coming with a state pension that is twice as much as the salary they make here at regular pay. So I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. It's not just a one size fits all when you talk about pensions and you talk about employees and you talk about promotions.
Right.
Can you just clarify then, are the 6 new positions that I see in the backup, are those promotions from within, or is that a plan to hire people from outside the department?
I'm not sure that I understand what you mean by 6 new positions.
Okay, let me see if I can find.
If you're talking about hiring captains and deputy chiefs, that could be done at any time, and their pay would come out of the regular payroll account, provided there's enough money in there. So, and the other answer is that yes, most of the time those promotions come from within. Sometimes they don't, but the majority of them do. So you're already taking people who are on your payroll books and you're promoting them. So the only thing that's different is they're making a higher rate of pay.
Right, so that's my question. I'm asking whether it is that what I'm looking at a proposal to promote folks into these higher ranks, or are we looking at, because when I'm looking at budget form number 2 for the police department, where it has the number of positions, current year budget actual, and the budget year request. What it says is currently we have budgeted for 60 officers. We actually have 52 officers, and now our budget year request for fiscal year 2021 is 58 officers. So I'm reading that as a request to add 6 officers to the payroll, independent of any promotions that might be made into these other positions from within.
No, those additional positions are already in the budget. They're just unfilled.
Well, if you look at the current year budget as being 60 officers, so you're currently budgeted for 60 officers, and then under budget year request, you're asking to fund 58 officers, which is actually a net drop of 2, but it represents an increase of 6 people over the 52 that are currently on the payroll, according to the document.
Yeah, but that's just a budget form request. What actually is occurring is that those 58 positions are already in the budget if we wanted to fill them. You don't need, the only new money you would need, and maybe not need new money, is for pay increases.
Right, so I think that is my question. Are you asking to hire 6 more officers, or are you just saying we need this 5.32% increase in regular payroll to fund promotions?
No, that increase probably represents the change in the contract, their pay increases. But the number of positions remains constant.
Right, but within the number of positions, the ranks are changing, I think. And I don't think that there actually is anything budgeted for deputy chief of police. So some big chunk of that change has to be for the deputy chief of police, because there isn't one. It says 0 budgeted, 0 actual, and 1 requested. So that's a brand new request, right?
That's a brand new request that will be accommodated in the payroll line item, regardless of what the payroll line item is, what that final number is.
Right, so where we spent $4 million on regular payroll in fiscal year 2019, and we budgeted for fiscal year 2020, 4.7 million, we're now requesting to increase that again to 4.9 million. It's an increase of 5.32%, just in regular payroll. And that doesn't even count all of the other line items within the police department that when you look at the budget runs and you compare the amount that's budgeted consistently year after year to the amount that's actually spent, those two numbers bear little relationship to one another. So what I'm saying is we should apply the same budgeting practices to the police department that we apply to every other department in the city, including, frankly, the Board of Education, to say we budget for actual anticipated expenses. And if we're trying to just build up a surplus,
I'm on the phone right now with
we
the.
do that in the form of establishing
budget.
and funding a rainy day fund. We don't do it through the police
Huh?
department.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
and I'm
so
hoping to
noted.
try to find a place to, to stop this.
Who's talking? What's that all about? We've got to find a place to stop this. What?
Okay,
We
another
can
question
move on.
came up on sanitation. During the course of this year, the sanitation contract, which is probably a year in arrears, was finalized, and so for the increase. So that increase probably reflects 2 years of a budget increase.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't follow that. Could you just say that again?
The sanitation, the garbage collection contract,
Right.
recycling, the contracts were just settled, I want to say, in the late fall of this year, after the budget was set, so those increases did not get incorporated into this year's budget. So next year will represent 2 years of an increase.
Okay, so the 15306 is the correct number?
That's the contracted number.
That's the result of the new contract, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And when we get to the last one, the Board of Education Transportation, I'll let you ask your questions on that because I couldn't quite follow the line of the questioning.
Okay. So I'll try to summarize. If I am understanding the budget layout correctly right now, the expenditure side of the budget reflects a flat fee that the city is spending on the Board of Ed transportation contract of $3.15 million. The revenue side of the budget also reflects that same flat fee of $3.15 million. In my view, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the city to budget in this way, where you're essentially paying the money to the Board of Education in the form of their budget allocation, then accepting $3.15 million back from them on the revenue side, which you are then paying out again and reflecting that a third time in the budget under an operating expense. So that's one issue.
Okay, so let me respond to that. That was a court stipulated agreement.
So in your view, that's the way you have to reflect it in the budget?
Well, at least for now. Court stipulated agreement. I know you know what that is.
Okay. So the other issue is that even if we accept that that is the result of a court order, there is no information in this budget that tells us what money is actually being spent for what costs relating to the bus transportation. So if we go into any other part of this budget, we can see payroll costs, we can see insurance costs, we can see fuel costs, and we can monitor those costs over the course of the year. This budget contains none of that information. So in order to know whether or not we should be budgeting $3.15 million for bus transportation for the Board of Education, we need to know what the actual costs are.
Okay, that'll probably all arrive once we get through 1 year and have experienced what those actual expenses are. But our deal is that we gave them a guaranteed price, court stipulated agreement. The fuel cost is borne by the Board of Ed. The cost of the insurance has always been borne by the city in the insurance line item. And the rest of the items that you mentioned are all part of the 3.15.
Okay, so can you tell me what line item is the city cost of insurance for the buses?
I don't know what the line item is, but it's in city insurance. I think it's like $800,000-900,000. I'm not sure what, do you know what the number is?
Is Mr. Hiller there? Maybe he can point us.
Yeah, yes, I am. It's within the 5400 account for city insurance. It's within that. I don't have the exact number within it, but
it's all in one line item, is what the answer is.
Okay, so does that mean that the total cost of insuring all city vehicles is all in one line item, so we don't have a breakout?
that is correct.
Okay, so again, I think it would be helpful to know, how much are we spending on insurance for city buses versus city dump trucks and other vehicles that aren't being used for student transportation, because knowing what the costs are of the insurance bears on what this actually is, this city.
I was mistaken. It's in the 5600 line under municipal insurance.
Okay, but it's still not broken out?
It is not, no, because we pay one premium to KERMA.
Okay. I'm assuming that KERMA must give you a disclosure of what you're paying for insurance for various vehicles.
It's not, the invoice we get is really just a quarterly invoice that's paid quarterly for the entire coverage for property insurance, liability, all vehicles, police, fire, buses, highways and bridges.
Well, when we add things, sometimes there's an assessment, sometimes there's not. When we bought the buses, we had to have insurance on them, so there was a separate policy for the insurance on the buses, and that's one number. It is not reflected in the budget. It's under municipal insurance.
Okay. Can we get the numbers for the regular and part-time payroll of employees that are associated with the bus drivers, the aides, the mechanics, the cost of the background checks, the cost of drug testing, all the other things that I listed on page 3?
The aides are covered within the Board of Education budget. All the monitors and aides on the buses are not on the city side. The other employees, as far as the management, the drivers, and the mechanics, are within the 3.15 million.
Yeah, I understand. It's the within part that's the issue here, right? So we have the 3.15 million number. We do not know what the breakdown is in terms of the actual cost associated with running the bus company and whether it costs more or less than $3.15 million. And it's completely inconsistent with all of the other departments in the city. Even if you look at the Highways and Bridges Department and the Public Works Department, there are line items for supplies that they need, parts, maintenance, licensing, all of these things that go into running this segment of the city economy.
Okay, so allow me to respond to that, because that's an easy answer for me. When you've got a 30-year history with a department, you can to a good degree predict from year to year what your needs are going to be. You can't do that when you're doing something for the very first time. And we haven't even completed the full year yet.
But we have been doing it since
Let
September.
me finish. So if this type of scrutiny was so important, I've never heard it asked over the school bus contract when the school bus contract was held by the Board of Education. And the fact that the school bus contract in the last year that the school had it was $4,300,000. We gave them a guaranteed price of $3,150,000. Pretty big difference. Pretty big difference.
This is about crafting this year's
I know what it's about. You know, this is nonsense. This is about a lot of nonsense right now. You know, and I'll tell you, I'm not going to sit here too much longer and be browbeat by these questions. We've given you answers. If they're not good enough, okay. Those are the answers.
Okay,
Because
so
I'm
the
ready to
answer
move
is
on.
you're not willing to provide any breakdown for the cost within the 3.15, and you're not going to ask the Board of Aldermen to add line items to the budget that would track these things.
Once we have a full year completed where we can break them all out, then it would make some more sense.
Is there
But
a
right now,
why can't we look at the figures as they exist now to try to project for the upcoming year whether or not this is a reasonable number? We have the numbers from September through March, at least, right?
No, we have the numbers from July through March. And
Even better.
here again, we have a guaranteed price that we've given to the Board of Education for 2 years in a row. So that's the number.
Okay, respectfully, that's not really the issue, though. It really has to do with.
I know you want it broken out, and it's not going to happen now. You know, once we get to a full year, we'll break it out. You know, what should be my priorities? Making sure that the service runs properly and that the buses are maintained? Or should I worry about doing a breakout of the expenses for a budget hearing?
It's not about the budget hearing.
It's a lot easier when you got a 30-year run of the department and you do this on a day-to-day basis. That's what you don't understand.
Well, I do.
Maybe you don't want.
When I look at
that's okay.
I look at the other departments and I see all of these things listed, and everybody believes that that's best practice for forming budgets. And yet this is a glaring example of where we as a city are not doing that piece. And I think that we owe it to the public when we publish a budget to be fully transparent in terms of the costs and expenses, what we're doing with the tax dollars, and whether or not we're being a good fiduciary of those tax dollars.
Okay. That completes the list of questions that you submitted to me.
No, it does not.
It does for me, because that's what you submitted, and that's all I'm speaking to today.
At the bottom of page 3, I have questions about management information services. And at the top of page 4, there are questions about the capital project funds and the operating funds. Do you have those?
I do not have any of that.
Mr. Hiller, do you have that for the mayor?
I do not have, I have your sheets in front of me. It goes through page 3, which winds up with the bus contracts.
I have a copy of it in front of me, and I think everybody has a copy of it because I emailed it to everyone at the same time. So all I can suggest is that maybe you didn't print out all 4 pages, and I don't know how you would have missed half of page 3.
I don't know. I was not aware. I have 3 pages. The last page I have halfway down the page says, what is the cost of student transportation as a percentage of the total BOE budget? That's the last statement I have.
Well, let me ask this, because I can send you another copy of it if that would be helpful. But I have a significant concern about line item 6900 991.60-17 and 6900-992.20-18 operating funds. There is nothing in the backup documents that indicates that corresponds to those numbers. It's a budget of $1.1 million for capital projects. Nothing is specified in the backup materials about what capital projects that's going to spend. And then there's another $500,000 in the label of operating funds that has nothing attached to it. So that's a total of $1.6 million for which there is no explanation. I also see on the revenue side of the budget, and I'll just put this out there in case that this is the explanation. This is the only correlation I could find. On the revenue side, number 301.20-00, there's an additional surplus estimate, contains the mayor's request of $1.6 million, which happens to be the same number, but I don't know whether that's a coincidence. I don't know whether this is a request to take money and to put it into another surplus account.
Well, we won't know the answer to that until we are able to realize the revenue, if it materializes or not. And capital projects funds, what do you think that means?
Is that a rhetorical question?
That's a question.
So what I see in the backup documents is that there are a lot of different departments that have capital projects budgeted, or not budgeted, but projected for fiscal year 2021. They add up to millions and millions of dollars. None of those is specifically budgeted for in fiscal year 2021. The only reference to capital projects is this $1.1 million. So I don't know, sitting here today, whether that $1.1 million corresponds to all or part or some, and what part of the capital projects the city plans to fund. They're not attached to, there's nothing telling me, okay, this is the police department, or this is the highways and bridges department. What capital projects is that?
Again, because of your lack of involvement and experience with this stuff, I'm not surprised at these questions. For the last 29 years, none of those 6-year capital projects that are listed in the back of the budget by departments have ever been funded. Things get funded on a priority basis, and sometimes the priority changes from time to time. You may or may not remember a couple of years back where I put $600,000 in the capital projects fund to pay for a partial payment of the rehabilitation of the high school football field and track. You may be aware of the fact that we've been doing a lot of work around Shelf High School, particularly the paving of the parking lots, drainages, now the tennis courts. You may be aware of the fact that there is really no money budgeted for road reconstruction or road paving that does need to occur on an annual basis. So if revenues are realized, then we'll have money to do those things. You may or may not be familiar with the work that we've been doing down on Canal Street. Over the last 15 to 18 years, we've been reconstructing portions of that road. We have one more phase that's left that is a multi-million-dollar phase. So there is any number of things that would be served by that 1.6 million if it's realized in revenue. If it's not realized in revenue, then they don't get done. So if you're looking for a very transparent, specific commitment, it's not going to happen. You've got my answer.
Okay, so
Put a period to that.
$1.1 million, and we'll decide later what that's going to be used for?
That's correct.
Okay, and what about the $500,000 in operating funds? What is it operating?
That will have to be approved by, any of those expenses will be approved by the Board of Aldermen.
So we have no information going into the budget season about what the $500,000 is going to be used for?
The $500,000 is there in the event that we need an emergency expenditure that we have got a source to go to, because I don't know what other requirements the government is going to place on us in terms of reopening city services, and the things that they want you to do become very costly.
Well, I mean, that's something that actually sort of makes sense to me. If we attached it to reopening expenses and public health.
I think I'm going to stop talking then, and let you say what you want to say, and then we'll move on.
I thought I was supporting what you were saying. If it's something that is necessary to the reopening and to protecting public health, then it would make sense to me that we would budget some money for that and we would allocate it to that specific purpose. I also have a question about the line item in the revenue section 321.19-00, which says B/E reimbursements. Can you tell us what that is?
Board of Ed reimbursements, that's money that comes from the state grants.
Okay, so I guess is it coming back to the city from the Board of Education, or is it direct grants from the state to the city?
Well, those are direct grants that go to the Board of Ed, are they not?
I'm sorry, did you say direct grants to the Board of Ed?
Yeah. Why they send them to the city and then the city pays the Board of Ed bill? I don't know why it's always been done that way, but that's the way it's been done.
Okay. My question is, right now, the year-to-date receipts in that line item are $160,000, and the current year's budget was $950,000, and we're projecting an increase to $1 million. Or I'm sorry, projecting an increase to almost $2 million for next year. So can you tell us why we're projecting that increase to almost $2 million for next year when we've only received approximately $160,000 in that line item to date?
Because that's the number that the Board of Ed supplies us. That's what they anticipate. In fact, our ECS grant was recently cut by $177,000. So all of these grants and these revenues and these projections are moving targets, and you never know what you're going to get and what you're not going to get. So we're going to run a deficit in our ECS reimbursement that we budgeted X amount of dollars for, but it'll be $177,000 short.
Yeah, I mean, that is a concern. And I think that my concern is that if we know already that we're running short this year and we're not anywhere near the $950,000 that we thought we were going to receive, why are we projecting $1.9 million to be received in that same line item next year?
Again, that's the number the Board of Ed sent to us.
Okay. Mr. Hiller, do you have any more information about that could shed some light on that?
It is basically money that we anticipate once the Board of Ed files their applications for repayment, that we will get back on numerous building projects that have been completed.
Which they have in fact failed to do for several years now.
Yes,
They have
they are
not put in
they are
for it.
in the process. This includes Shelton High School. The 160,000 that you see was reimbursement for the window project at Elizabeth Shelton School. There's money due on the fire suppression project at Shelton High School, and also on the Sunnyside School roof.
Okay. So are you working with the Board of Ed to get the reimbursements from the state? Do you think that those
I've been in contact with Mr. Belden on numerous occasions. He has promised me that one of the problems is we have to rely upon them to file the paperwork. And his predecessors did not file paperwork. He has been diligently working on that. I believe several items were filed this week. It's then a question as to when the state will pay us. But if you add up the 2 years, which gets you up to about $2.8 million, we anticipate that it will be in excess of that, frankly, that we might receive.
Okay, so you're not concerned that this is going to result. My only concern here is that if it's not realistic to expect that this money is actually coming in, we shouldn't be putting it in the budget. That's my only concern.
I understand, but I think if anything, we're on the low side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I feel that if all the questions have been, they have all been answered. Questions have been asked and answered. Unfortunately, we're also at a time which has been said many times already, that because of our current situation, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So a lot of this may just be a moot point and may have to end up being readdressed once we find out what happens at the very end of this crisis that we're all facing. And this is something that's not unique to the city of Shelton, okay? So I think at this point in time, I would like to, make a motion that we vote on this current budget.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, anybody else? Any
Well, I'd
questions?
like to discuss the motion.
Let's do this one at a time, please. There's a motion on the floor by Quinn, and it was seconded by Boyko, and now discussion. And everyone understands what the motion is?
It's the
I
motion
do.
to pass the budget as it exists, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I continue to believe that we have an obligation to conduct actual budget hearings. And I sent this team a copy of the governor's executive order 7HH, which clarifies the prior executive order. I think makes it pretty clear that while we're authorized to extend deadlines and we're authorized to not appear in person to take votes, we are not authorized to upend the budget process. And we are not having actual department budget hearings right now. We are just discussing it amongst ourselves and proposing to take a vote on a budget without even having heard from a major party to the budget, which is the Board of Education. So I am proposing that we again table the motion to vote on the budget and that we schedule a budget hearing with the Board of Education so that we can hear from them about how this proposed budget is going to impact them and what they would have to do in order to absorb the cut that is being proposed.
Well, I would, let me just weigh in on the last portion of that comment. Every year at budget time, the Board of Education either gets the same amount or more money, but it equates to a cut. And in my view, that's just bad math.
And I can certainly, agree with the mayor on that.
I'm
Haven't
making a
been on the
motion
Board of
to table.
Education.
I'll second it.
I'll second it also.
What are we seconding?
I made a motion to table.
It is a motion to table, and who seconded it?
Steve Guralnick.
Okay,
And Joe
so there's
Napick
no-
also seconded it.
There's no discussion on a table, so we're gonna vote. We're gonna do by roll call, and we're gonna start out with Jay Quinn.
Okay, I agree that we need to move forward.
Well, the motion is to table. It's either a yes or a no.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. No. I vote no to table.
John Feldman,
No.
Don Boyko,
No.
Steve Guralnick,
Yes.
Joe Napick,
Yes.
Michelle Alban.
Yes.
There are 3 yeses and 3 nos. The chair will cast the dissenting vote. The motion fails. We're back to the original motion. Is there
Okay.
any more discussion on the original motion?
Since I'm
There
not
are no
hearing
other
that anybody
discussions.
else
I think
wants
we
to
should move on
discuss this,
to a vote.
I would like to let you know that at this point in time, I feel like I have no choice but to leave the meeting. And if my fellow Democrats also leave the meeting, you will not have a quorum. And I'd like to remind you that the mayor does not count towards the presence of a quorum for this meeting. If there is no tie, there's no vote for the mayor to break. So I'd like to ask again that we table the motion and we schedule a budget hearing with the Board of Education.
Well, look, there's no table. We went through the table. You're essentially going to get the same results. So there's no sense in going through the vote on the table. You know, whether you want to schedule a meeting with the Board of Ed, a budget meeting, you know, that's up to the chair to do that and the board to decide.
Mr. Francino Quinn, I respectfully
I do not
request that
believe-
we
I do not believe
schedule
at
a
this
budget
point in
hearing
time-
with the Board of Education.
I do not believe at this point in time, until we know what's going to happen, that we need to schedule a meeting with the Board of Education. It seems to me the Board of Education is currently in talks with, the mayor and with Paul Hillard. Okay, and we need to have confidence that in the end, since we have a new Board of Education, that that the right thing will be done in the long run. All right, so I don't feel at this stage of the game that we should be. Okay, I don't believe we should be having a meeting right now with the Board of Education.
Okay, so if that request is being refused, then respectfully, I am leaving this meeting. And I leave you to take whatever action you feel is appropriate. Have a good night.
Joe Napick is leaving the meeting also.
Steve Guralnick is leaving the meeting.
Hello.
Let me just have a recess for 5 minutes.
Roger that. Standing by.
So there's only 3 people left on the call. Just verify that. How many numbers? We're down to 6, not including our call-in and computer. Both of you on the call?
I am here.
Boyko here.
I'm here.
John Belden?
I'm here.
Okay, we're all here, Mr. Mayor.